There we go. All right. Hi, everybody. So
Hi.
in lieu of an official icebreaker, well, I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Rabbi Ilana. I use she, her pronouns. I was ordained just this past year, so it's just my 1 year anniversary of being a rabbi, which is pretty cool.
Mazel
Thank
tov,
you
mazel
all.
tov.
And I'm up in Saratoga Springs in upstate New York. And I'm so excited to be teaching all of you. It's really cool. I heard just a little bit of where some of you are from. So from Maine to Texas and other places. So cool that we all get to be studying together. Interesting with different time zones around, something that is time sensitive with the sun setting. But some of us will count now and some of us will count in an hour, and that's fine. But in lieu of an official icebreaker, I want to invite everyone to type into the chat if you would just say where you're from and your favorite dish that has wheat in it. Got it? Pizza, pasta, soup, bread, whatever your favorite wheat dish is. Beer. So where you're from and your favorite wheat dish. Guinness is an inspired answer. Oh no, allergic to wheat. I'm sorry. You can answer for barley instead if you want. Wheat and barley are the Omer counting. Ooh, Kashka Varnishkas. That's a fun one. I think I'm probably bread too. I feel like bread is the most versatile. I think that's the way to go.
Like a good French bread that's crunchy on the outside and
Yeah, with a nice slab of
perfect.
butter on it.
Yes,
Yeah.
done.
Yeah, pasta is also a good, every culture has its pasta, so you can't go wrong with that. Wonderful. Well, keep typing, keep adding. It really is amazing to see real rye bread, not the fake stuff, the real stuff. I got you. It's amazing to see where everybody is from, and to be hungry for all of the things that you're naming. Thank you for sharing. So today we're entering the fourth week of the Omer. And so we're going to be talking about the fourth day of creation. What was created on the fourth day of creation? This is the audience participation part. I'm going to need you to unmute and share.
That's going to be sun, moon, and stars, yeah?
Sun, moon, and stars. Yes, thank you. So we could talk for a really long time about all of those things. But I decided I'd just go with the one that was most interesting to me, which is, and I'm going to share my screen, the moon. Can you all see my screen okay? Just give me a thumbs up if you can see it. Great. Okay. So it was apt that we were talking about space before. So why is the moon important in Judaism? When does the moon come up for us?
The beginning of a month.
Yeah, the beginning of the month, right? So we look for the moon every month. What
And
else? What else does the moon come up?
it's ruled by women. Thank you.
Yeah, right. So it's one of the sort of few things in traditional Judaism that's connected to women, specifically connected to the menstrual cycle, but has sort of a feminine quality to it. Other things?
Holidays like Sukkot or Passover that happen on full moons?
Yeah, so many of our holidays, if not most of them, start on the full moon. So often when you see a full moon in the sky, of course it means it's halfway through the month, but it also likely means that there's a holiday starting.
But it's interesting that we always only see the man in the moon.
No,
All
it's not.
right. Right. We're in a patriarchal society, and we have to remember that, right? But perhaps, right, there is something about sort of the gender balance. There's a weird tradition in Judaism, I didn't include it in this presentation, but of like men going out and dancing under the new moon. Something weird. It's something like weird and Kabbalistic. No offense to anyone who is Kabbalistic, but it's one of those sort of esoteric pieces of Judaism that I remember learning about in my year in Israel. So moon comes up. Sorry, was there one more comment? All right, the moon comes up a lot in Judaism, and we're going to start just with the fourth day of creation, and then we'll kind of work our way out to these other occurrences. Again, if we had more time, we would really dwell and dig into each of these texts, but we'll take a little time for each and then kind of come to a nice conclusion about the moon. I'm going to ask for readers to help us out. Would someone read just what's on the screen for us, please?
This is Stacy. I could go ahead.
Thank you, Stacy.
God said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the sky to separate day from night. They shall serve as signs for the set times, the days and the years, and they shall serve as lights in the expanse of the sky to shine upon the earth." And it was so. God made the two great lights, the greater light to dominate the day, and the lesser light to dominate the night, and the stars. And God set them in the expanse of the sky to shine upon the earth, to dominate the day and the night, and to separate light from darkness. And God saw that this was good. And there was evening and there was morning, a fourth day.
Thank you. So as we already said, on the fourth day, we have the sun and the moon and the stars created. And the question that comes up from this are the sun and the moon equal?
Not according to the wording here, the greater light and the lesser light.
Right. So there's a greater light and there's a lesser light, and the sun is the greater light, which might perhaps make us feel sad for the moon, although the moon is smaller. Other
But
thoughts?
I'm
Yeah.
looking at, and I agree with Babby, because I know better not to disagree with her. But even though the sun is called the greater light, the moon actually is looking over more items. It's looking over not the earth, which is one item, but looking over the expansiveness of all the stars.
That's
So
interesting.
I would say that yeah, a large earth, a lot of stars, that they're pretty much equal.
You cut out at the end, so I didn't hear the end, but I think it's a point well taken, right? That the sun has one thing to dominate and the moon has many things, right? The universe is so much more expansive than just what the sun has dominion over. Yeah, absolutely. So the rabbis notice, right, that the sun and the moon are not quite treated equally. And as we named in our calendar also, I didn't ask you how the sun comes up, but we know that the sun is not as important in the Jewish calendar. The Jewish calendar corrects itself so that we're in line with the seasons and the sun, but the moon really is our dominant time-keeping body. So the rabbis ask, what's going on with this difference between the sun and the moon? And as they often do, they give the moon a personality. So we're going to read here from the Talmud a story about the moon and a story about the moon acting in her own defense, if you will. It's kind of a cute one, I think. Again, a reader for us.
I'll give it.
I'm seeing that your name is Douglas, but I think your name is not Douglas.
No, it's Ruth Solo.
Ruth, would you please?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Rabbi Simon ben Pazi raises a contradiction. It is written, God made the two great lights, and also the greater to rule the day and the lesser to rule the night, indicating that only one was great. Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi explains, when God created the sun and moon, they were equally bright. Then the moon said, Master of the universe, is it possible for two kings to serve with one crown? One of us must be subservient to the other. God therefore said to her, if so, go and diminish yourself. She said, "Since I said a correct observation, must I diminish myself?" God said, "As compensation, go and rule both during the day along with the sun and during the night." She said, "What is the greatness of shining alongside the sun?" God said, "Then let the Jewish people count the days and years with you." She said, "But the Jewish people will count with the sun as well to align with the seasons." God said, "Then let righteous men be named after you. Just as you are called the lesser light, there will be Yaakov ha-Katan, our forefather, and David ha-Katan, the king." God saw the moon was not comforted. God said, "Atone for me, since I diminished the moon." Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish says, "Why does the goat offering of the new moon state for the Lord?" Numbers 28:15. It is atonement for God having diminished the moon.
Thank you. So the first thing I'll just point out and name for us is you might have noticed that the moon is is using female pronouns here. How do we say moon in Hebrew? Does anyone know? There are kind of two ways. So one is Yareach, which I would say is sort of the more, if you go to Israel and you're talking about the moon, that's probably the word you're going to hear, I think. And the other one is Levana. Levan meaning, anyone?
White. So the
White.
Levana is the white thing in the sky.
Yeah, the white thing in the sky, which is the moon. And Levana is a feminine word. It has the ending, which is likely why we're using female pronouns, although we could say the moon has a feminine personality, however you want to think about it. So what personality is the moon given here?
Logical.
Subservient.
No, I'm viewing it as
Well,
So she at first is subservient, right? God puts her in this subservient space, right? And she says, "Well, I see that, but shouldn't I get a reward then for being subservient?" Right? She's kind of a little sneaky or something.
She's kind of impudent,
I think
impudent or coquettish almost.
Yeah. I like that word, coquettish. The coquettish moon.
but she's also standing up for herself.
Yeah.
I mean,
yes. Yeah.
she's asserting that, it's just not right.
Right. And
Yeah.
you might say, the lesser thing, right? What right does she have to assert herself? But she says, I'm important too, right? And God agrees. It's not all the time that we have God agreeing with human beings or with other beings. The moon is not a human being, but God actually takes her side on this.
And this is Stacy. I find this very interesting because I had an adoptive grandfather that would always argue with the rabbi.
Yeah.
And would say it is our right to argue, to discuss. And here, even during the creation, something that God created is already showing us that it's okay to speak logically, to argue with God.
Yeah. Right. So good for the moon, right? The moon is a good role model for us in a way, as it were.
Rabbi, it also, the moon here to me reminds me of a youngest child who, doesn't want to be overlooked and is just shy of stamping her foot, is trying to be heard.
Yeah. And I think that brings us kind of to towards the bottom. It says, "Then let righteous men be named after you." Right. So we have Yaakov Hakatan, who is Jacob in the Torah, right? Jacob, who is the younger sibling, but takes a stand for himself, as we all know. And also King David, who is we have the David and Goliath story where he's the smaller one defeating the mightier one. And he also is the one from meager beginnings who is chosen to succeed King Saul, right? So two people who are really rise above their station, just like the moon is doing here.
There you go.
I also think it's interesting that at the end, so during, God agrees with the moon, but then at the end, God atones, right? God says, I was wrong, I made a mistake, and I need to seek forgiveness. It's sort of confusing of who does God atone to, but it is cool that God recognizes that God made a mistake, just like we all make mistakes, right? So the moon becomes a very important figure, not necessarily personified, but in the rabbinic imagination, especially because of the calendar. And the Mishnah Torah is a book of law by Maimonides, who teaches us, let me go backwards. In the Talmud, the rabbis lay out a tradition for blessing the new moon. But in the Talmud, we're never quite sure if things that are written are actual practice or sort of in the rabbinic imagination from when the temple stood. But when it's in the Mishnah Torah from Maimonides, we know that he's actually prescribing living Jews in the diaspora to be following these rituals. So he prescribes a ritual for seeing the new moon, which includes a blessing that is still said today in many communities. Maybe some of you say it. But let's read it together. Again, a reader for us. I'm seeing Virginia.
Yeah.
Please.
When a person sees the moon after it's renewed, he should recite the blessing, Blessed are you, God, our Lord, King of the universe, who created the heavens with his word and all their hosts with the breath of his mouth. He granted them a fixed law and schedule so that they should not alter their tasks. They rejoice and are glad to carry out the will of their Creator. They are faithful servants whose work is righteous. He instructed the moon to renew itself as a crown of glory to those who are born from the womb, who are destined to be renewed and to glorify their Creator for the name of the glory of his kingdom and for all creation. Blessed are you, God, who renews the months. This blessing should be recited while standing, for whoever recites the blessing at its appropriate time is considered as if he greeted the divine presence. If a person did not recite it on the first night, he may recite it until the 16th, until the moon becomes full.
Thank you. So the blessing could have been as simple, really, as the last line, right? Blessed are you, God, who renews the months. That's all we really need to say. But the blessing is much longer than that. And there are other parts to the ritual that I didn't include on this slide, again, because we don't have time, that really talk about praising the moon and praising the cycle of the seasons. So why is this blessing so drawn out? Why do we have such a ceremony for it?
It's a good question.
I think
Thank you.
because it elevates the moon. It makes it more important.
Yeah, right. We don't have someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there's a blessing for seeing the sun. There are blessings for waking up in the morning and seeing beautiful things. I don't think there's a blessing specifically for the sun, but again, correct me if I'm wrong.
There is a very rare blessing for the sun that's said, I think, over the course of like once in an extremely long time. I can look it up. It's Birkat HaChachama. We said it back in, was it 2014? I'll find it for you, but it's almost never the blessing of the moon every month.
Yeah, cool. Thank you very much. That was very helpful. Right, so every month, and it really does elevate the moon. What's interesting is in the sort of subscript, right, in the part of Maimonides telling us how we're supposed to say the blessing, it's very clear that you elevate the moon, but you don't elevate the moon to the point of God, right? The moon is not an idol, but it is something that should be elevated. Other thoughts on this blessing?
I think it's interesting that there's a phrase, are born from the womb, faithful servants who's, I mean, it's like coming from darkness to light. It's like coming from creation into being. I think it's one of the places that unites the idea of how feminine the moon is, but also how important.
Yeah, I saw the connection here in part as relating to, as we said before, that the moon has this sort of feminine aspect,
Yeah.
right? Again, connected with the menstrual cycle. So perhaps there is a specific connection with the womb, but also with the renewing, right? That's how life works. Life is a cycle, and the moon is a cycle, and the months are a cycle, and all of that, right?
Yeah.
Other thoughts?
Closing the loop, the sun is blessed only once every 28 years.
That's a long time. Yeah. So we're right. And maybe there is something about what is I shouldn't say this in this group, but like if Christmas were every day, then it wouldn't be special, right? So maybe there is something about the rarity of the blessing makes the blessing special. Or perhaps the frequency of the moon blessing makes us know that the moon is special. We could kind of argue either way, but I think there is a real importance on the moon.
I have a question, and I'm sorry, I don't know how to raise my hand. This is Ellen. I just don't get, after the word womb, I just don't really get the rest of that sentence. Does that mean all people are destined to be renewed? And if so, that's fine. And then what is it to glorify? I don't get the rest of that sentence.
So the people who are being renewed are the Jewish people, right? And specifically the Jewish people, because we are connected to the moon, right? Our calendar is lunar, right? So we go by the moon. In terms of the rest of the sentence, it really is just sort of circling back to this idea of it's not just about the moon itself, right? And it's not just about us, but everything comes back to God, right? Everything comes back to the creator and really back to the fourth day of creation, right? As we're talking about today, that we wouldn't have the moon if God hadn't first created. And we wouldn't have any of the cycles that we live in if God hadn't first created the cycles to be lived in. That's a very repetitive sentence, but
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So as way of example of how else the moon is important, I have for us another story from the Talmud. One of my passions in Judaism is Jewish art. And this is a story that I found at one point and I just thought was fascinating. So we'll see the first paragraph is from the Mishnah. And then the second paragraph is the Talmud's commentary on the Mishnah, which is called the Gemara. And I'll ask again for another reader.
I'll read.
Thank you.
So, Talmud Bavli, Rosh Hashanah 24a, Mishnah. Rabban Gamliel had a diagram of the different forms of the moon drawn on a tablet that hung on the wall of his attic, which he would show to the laymen who came to testify about the new moon, but were unable to describe adequately what they had seen. And he would say to them, "Did you see a form like this or like this?"
I'm just going to pause you for 1 second. Why do we care about testifying about the new moon? Why is that important?
Calendar?
Yeah, right. It tells us when the new months are. And this is also the reason why in the diaspora we have some holidays that are 2 days, because we want to really make sure that we were on the day that was correct, right? We really want to make sure we were on the day of the full moon and not the day before, not the day, before. So you need to have time for the messengers from Israel to get to everywhere else. Anyway,
Right.
Please continue.
Okay, Gemara. Is it permitted to create these types of forms? Isn't it written, "You shall not make with me gods of silver or gods of gold," Exodus 20:20, which is interpreted as teaching, "You shall not make images of those celestial bodies which serve God, including the sun and the moon." Abaye said, the Torah prohibited only the images of those attendants of which it is possible to reproduce an item in their likeness. Since it is impossible for anyone to reproduce the sun and the moon, the prohibition does not apply to these objects. As it is taught in the Bharata, is that right? Bharata? A person may not construct a house in the exact form of the sanctuary.
Baraita is a piece of rabbinic commentary that didn't make it into the Mishnah. So some of them are
Thank you.
collected in the Gemara. Sorry for not explaining that in advance.
That's okay. Great.
So, what's the issue here? What's the issue that
Taking a picture.
right? So the Torah says no graven images, right? No images of anything, because the worry is that they're going to turn into idols, right? You're going to worship them like idols, like you did with the golden calf. So nothing. But Rabban Gamliel has these images of the moon, right? So how can we justify that? And what's the justification here?
That it's impossible to really reproduce those things.
Right. You can't make a moon. You could perhaps make the temple, right? You could perhaps make the pieces of the temple, but you can never make the moon. So it's fine to have a replica of it. And it's interesting that the rabbis make an exception sort of to a rule to allow for a drawing of the moon, because they know how important drawings of the moon are to faithfully following the Jewish calendar. I think that really teaches, that sort of shows the importance of the moon here. So we're coming to the end of the time, of our time, which means that we're gonna, we'll say the blessing. It's, I don't know that I see 3 stars, but I'm also inside. But it's pretty dark here in Saratoga Springs. So we're gonna get to the counting, and then we'll sort of wrap up our conversation together. So I will invite you to join me. Hineni muchan zuman lekayem mitzvat aseh shel sfirat ha-omer. Behold, I am ready and prepared to fulfill the mitzvah of counting the Omer. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al sfirat ha-omer. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who sanctifies us with mitzvot and commands us concerning the counting of the Omer. Hayom arba'a ve'esrim yom shehem shlosha shavuot ushlosha yamim la Omer. Today is 24 days, which is 3 weeks and 3 days of the Omer. Happy 24, everybody. We did it. So I'm going to stop sharing so we can sort of wrap up. The tradition is not to say the number that we are counting before we have actually said the blessing, because then you don't get to say the blessing. But I do think it's fitting, and I would have started with this if I could have said the number before, that 24 is the day of the day that we're talking about the moon, right? Because our calendar, our daily calendar, is 24 hours, and we know that the moon governs when we get to night and get to the next day in the Jewish calendar. So I think that's pretty cool. So we'll start to sort of wrap up. And again, we talked about, we started from this place of the sun, the moon, and the stars, right? And why is the moon the lesser light? But I think now the question for us sort of is the moon the lesser light, right? Between the sun and the moon, which is more important? Or is one more important than the other at all?
Liked the idea, I think it was Stacy who said that really the moon is looking over the universe. So the moon's got the stars. The sun's looking over the earth and is providing reflective light for the moon. So in this half hour, I'm coming away with a greater respect for the moon than when I started here a half hour ago.
That was one of the goals. But I think that this question of dominion is kind of interesting, because on the one hand, one might have a greater dominion than the other, but we also know that if we didn't have either in their proper dominion, then we couldn't function. We need both, right?
Yeah. All right. And this is Stacy. I view it as the sun we need for life, for growth, for physical existence, and the moon for spiritual existence.
Hmm.
Oh, nice.
I like that. Right. And that really is sort of how the calendar works, right? We know that the Jewish calendar is both lunar and solar, right? It corrects itself to the solar calendar. But the lunar part of it is determines the cycle of the holidays, right? And the cycle of the year, really. And the solar calendar determines the cycle of the things that sustain us, right? The cycle of the seasons and the harvests and things like that. I think that's a nice connection as well.
Well,
Any other closing, please?
I was thinking sort of in the lines of Stacy, but to me, the sun is the heart, the moon is the soul.
I like
Nice.
that.
I like that.
And it feels very rabbinic, right? The rabbis often talk about sort of the different functions of the different parts of the body, and that we need both, right? We need the physical body perhaps as a vessel for the soul, but if we didn't have one or the other, we couldn't exist. So we need both to help us to move through this life.
I have a very non-rabbinic idea
Please.
that is it plays on the stereotypes the gender stereotypes that we
Sure.
have, or the gender roles that we have, where men and women are very different, but it's necessary to have both. And men are often just seen for their strength and maybe the protective nature of them, standing outside the cave all the way to whatever. And it's kind of a singular thing, just like the sun is just this blast of light. And the moon, like women, has all kind of different roles and more nuance and different little things that she does, which kind of reminds me of women.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that explanation. And we know that for the Torah, right, the Torah in a lot of ways really exists in binaries of male and female, of day and night, of light and dark, and all of these other dichotomies. So perhaps we can kind of group one side of it and group the other side. But again, we know in real life that nothing really exists in a binary like that.
Yeah.
The same, I think, for the sun and the moon, right? There's no, it's not just that we have the moon over here, we have the sun over here, but really we have them working together. They sort of collapse the binary for us.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for studying with me. This was, again, just so fun to see people from all across the country and to participate in this ritual together. A ritual which, because it's about counting days, is certainly about the moon. So may you all have a wonderful counting, and may you all see many beautiful moons from now until Shavuot and beyond.
That's great. Thank you.
Be well, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.